On the morning of July 28, 1914, Europe was a powder keg, just waiting to explode. And when Austria-Hungary dropped a diplomatic match into it, the resulting conflagration would soon engulf the entire world. But why did they strike the first blow? In Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia, a young man named Gavrilo Princip had assassinated Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and his wife, Sophie. The Austrians blamed Serbia for the crime and were preparing for intervention. But why? What had the Austrians and Serbs done to each other? Well, since the 1870s, Serbian nationalists had been a thorn in the side of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. At the time, the empire encompassed a huge swath of southeastern Europe, including modern-day Austria, Hungary, Slovakia, the Czech Republic, parts of Italy, Romania and Russia, not to mention Bosnia. It was a patchwork quilt of many different ethnic groups, including the Slavs. Over the years, Serbian nationalists had agitated for the independence of Slavic territories within the empire, most of which were ruled as personal unions with Austria or Hungary. In particular, Slavic irredentists in areas just outside the empire's borders wanted to break away from Habsburg rule and join the Kingdom of Serbia. This included Bosnia, which Austria had annexed in 1908, much to the anger of the Serbs. Then came the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, an event that Austria-Hungary saw as the perfect chance to put down the Serbian nationalist threat once and for all. But wait a minute, wasn't this the other way around? Didn't Serbia blame Austria for the murder and take action to defend itself? Well, yes, but only after Austria made the decision to go to war first. Although Austria-Hungary issued an ultimatum to Serbia, demanding, among other things, that it allow Austrian officials to pursue the investigation into the assassination on Serbian soil, it really had no intention of accepting any answer but war. Knowing that Serbia would never agree to such humiliating terms, Austria deliberately set the stage for conflict. Why do you think they did this? Well, there are several theories. Some historians argue that the assassination gave Austria the excuse they needed to crush Serbian nationalism once and for all. Others point to the fact that Austria-Hungary was in decline and that war was a way of rallying the population around the flag and thus preserving the empire. Still, others argue that pressure from Germany, which backed Austria unconditionally, pushed the Austrians into war. After all, Kaiser Wilhelm II had given his cousin, the Austrian Emperor, a blank check for whatever amount he deemed necessary to deal with the situation in the Balkans. Given this support, Austria-Hungary decided to act. But even so, we can't help but wonder if they were so sure that they would go to war. Why bother issuing the ultimatum at all? Why not just declare war and get it over with? Well, doing nothing was simply not an option for an empire that prided itself on its power and prestige. If Austria-Hungary simply ignored the assassination, it would look weak, both to its neighbors and to its own citizens. On the other hand, going to war without a casus belli, a justifiable reason for doing so, could damage their reputation even more. So they needed a pretext, something to justify their actions. And they found it in Serbia. By issuing an ultimatum that they knew would not be accepted, they gave themselves the excuse they needed to declare war. They were confident that Serbia would refuse to accept their demands, which meant that they could strike first and not look like the aggressor. On July, the Austrians crossed into Serbia and began the invasion. 5 days later, they declared war on Russia, who came to Serbia's defense, and on France, who had obligations to defend Belgium, not to mention being tied to the Antwerp cordial. Soon, the whole of Europe was at war, and all because Austria-Hungary wanted to put down a rebellion in the Balkans. Although the Austrians had hoped for a quick and decisive victory, they soon found themselves bogged down in a brutal war of attrition. Within months, the conflict had spread from Europe to Africa and the Middle East. By the time it ended, more than 16 million people would be dead. So perhaps the real question is, why did it have to come to this? Austria-Hungary's decision to go to war was the result of decades of rising militarism, tangled alliances, and national rivalries. But at the end of the day, it was one small spark that ignited the powder keg. Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to subscribe and come back soon for another exciting episode.